Yes, thank you, Chair, honorable members of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. I had the opportunity to speak with you earlier this year, and it is again an honor to present to you today. I'm an IP lawyer, patent agent, and trademark agent with my firm Own Innovation. I'm also a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation, where I study innovation and intellectual property policy. I also teach innovation and IP commercialization strategies at Western University in London, Ontario. I express gratitude to the committee for studying this important topic. Security and control of Canadian research is both a matter of national security as well as national economic prosperity. The value of Canadian research is controlled by intellectual property and physical restriction. Whether we protect our research or not, countries are using it to advance their national agendas. So today we are talking about what happens when foreign actors use our technology and IP to put our national security at risk. Canadian research institutions, our universities, are some of Canada's most sacrosanct institutions. However, these institutions have been compromised. According to public reports, 50 Canadian universities have conducted extensive research with China's military since 2005. Huawei has partnered with over 20 of Canada's research institutions. Huawei has received intellectual property from the University of Waterloo, the University of Toronto, McGill University, the University of British Columbia, the University of Calgary, the University of Ottawa, the University of Laval, Institut National de la Recherche Scientifique, Carleton University, École Polytechnique de Montréal, Western University, the University of Regina, and McMaster University. I am naming these names so there is no longer a veil of secrecy in these deals. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Significant public funding, millions of dollars, and resources are being used. Hundreds of patents have been generated for Huawei through these deals. The commercial rights go to Huawei, and they can use this technology in any manner that they want. Canadians are legally prohibited from practicing these technologies. These are not one-off instances. This is a systematic exfiltration of Canadian publicly funded assets to an organization that now isn't even allowed in Canada's telecommunication systems. The federal government, through programs like the National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, NSERC, have not only been complicit in these arrangements, but they have been incentivizing this behavior. While there has been a recent shift in the approach because of the increasing public outcry, it has been entirely reactionary. NSERC has been funding Huawei research projects since at least 2010. And despite some changes, Canadian universities and researchers can still work with Huawei. They may just no longer be incentivized to do so. I propose the following recommendations modeled from global best practices from the United States and Australia and other jurisdictions. Transparency. We need to know who is working with Canadian research institutions and how much they have been benefiting. We really don't know the extent of the relationship or its impacts. We also need to know what this technology has been used for, particularly for dual-use technologies that may have commercial uses as well as nefarious purposes. Universities receiving public funding must track and report the flow of research and development efforts with annual and concrete disclosure, including how much and who they are working with. Proactive and not reactive policy. The fox is in charge of the henhouse. The universities and researchers themselves are in many cases tasked to self-report potential national security issues, but are in an inherent conflict of interest. So we must properly resource and incentivize universities to work with Canada's intelligence community to be up to date on the latest intelligence and understand challenges to proactively manage relationships for Canadian benefit. And consider legislation like Australia has adopted to review and, if necessary, cancel international agreements made by universities. Finally, we need to retain strategic Canadian intellectual property and data assets. We need to stop doing these terrible deals, end them now, and make sure we don't get into the same problem again. And we need to continuously update technologies of strategic importance. Economic and security risks are not separate issues. Intellectual property and data assets for artificial intelligence, quantum, photonics, biotech, and aerospace are dual-use technologies that have both economic and national security value. Any assessment of risk and net benefit needs to include both the economic value and security risks. China sees our universities as strategic IP generators for their military and firms, but it's not just China, it's the Americans, but it may also be Russia or Iran. The federal government needs to take control of the situation and ensure that publicly funded intellectual property and data assets benefit Canadians, not foreign militaries. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, and right on time with your comments. Thanks to both witnesses. Now we'll go into the 6-minute round of questions, starting with Mr. Masier. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Hinton, thank you for being here today again. I expect we're going to hear about the 2021 National Security Guidelines for Research Partnerships and the Minister's 2023 announcement on funding research partnerships during this study. I expect that the universities will say there's nothing to see here because the guidelines have changed. And I expect the government will say the minister has addressed this national security concerns with the new directive. So as a committee, what should we keep in mind when we hear the universities testify on this?
Yes, so thank you, and good to see the group again. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more going on under the surface, and fundamentally, there's a failure of governance at our Canadian universities. This has been a problem for years, and it's only with public scrutiny that we've seen any reaction. It's clear that they're not able to govern themselves. Yes, some universities appear to have ended their partnerships with Huawei, but what about the next issue?
Can you expand a bit on that? What potentially, what is, you made some comments around that, like foxes under the henhouse, is there really something like is lurking underneath? You talked about transparency and secrecy as well. Is there something there that we should be kind of asking some particular questions on?
Yep. Fundamentally, I would be asking who the universities have been partnering with, and to what extent, and where this technology has gone, and who's been the beneficiaries of that. And really importantly, have these technologies been used for nefarious purposes? We don't know the extent of what or where this has gone. It's all confidential. We've seen media reports on what's happened, but it's only because there has been media reports. Back in 2018, the Globe and Mail reported on this issue, and it's only mounting sort of public pressure where there's been reorientation. That means that the universities themselves are complicit in this funneling of IP to Huawei. They get a little bit of money. They're happy about it, but it's clear to me that it's only after they've been sort of put under the public microscope that they've been able, or have had the wherewithal to be able to sort of remove themselves from such a bad situation. We can't trust them to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Huawei's one example, but again, there's Russia, there's Iran, there's all these other and other Chinese state actors. We really don't know. And the 50 universities, that's a lot of Canadian universities that are working or that have worked with the Chinese military researchers. That's extensive. And this is really only the tip of the iceberg that we've seen publicly. The universities themselves know this information and have not been sharing this information.
Okay, thank you. Some researchers have claimed that scrutinizing national security threats of research funding is a threat to academic freedom. So what do you say to this argument?
Yeah, I teach at Western. I know academic freedom well. And academic freedom requires an environment of enabled autonomy with researchers are free from undue external influence. State military actors are undue influencers. Whether academics like to admit it or not, there are limitations what can and should be done under the name of academic freedom. Just like a researcher is not permitted to falsify research or plagiarize, they should not be able to aid and abet foreign military actors at the risk of Canada's national security.
Okay, and do you believe universities are capable of screening national security threats before engaging in research partnerships? And if not, why?
Yeah, I don't think that universities are capable of screening national security issues. They're not resourced. They don't have the wherewithal, and they're not experts. They have experts in photonics and quantum computing that graduate up through the ranks and become administrators of these institutions, but they're not experts on national security. And we even saw from the University of Waterloo issuing guidelines to researchers to slow down or advise them that they don't have to work with CSIS. But we should be collaborating. We should be working together. And the universities themselves benefit. They take a little bit of money and then they do whatever they want. Yes, there are new rules, some additional scrutiny, but it doesn't correct the dereliction of their duty and to the public interest in the pacts. They've made a mistake and they continue to make a mistake, and it hasn't corrected, and I wouldn't trust them to correct it themselves.
So some clear direction by either Parliament, I guess, or CSIS, or I guess there's needs to be more done. Some clear direction needs to be given to the universities by all means.
Yes, absolutely.
And this study would probably go a long way in starting that path down forward, I guess. Mr. Lupreck, I have one question. You mentioned something about 5 years ago that this issue seemed to be accelerating since about 5 years ago. What was the key thing that happened that all of a sudden this became a huge issue in our research community?
We have 20 seconds.
Aside from the known malfeasance by Chinese intelligence actors with regards to institutions such as the complete data exfiltration of Australian National University, we also had the very comprehensive report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which was the first report to flag these problematic collaborations, in which at the time, out of 2,500 problematic collaborations over 10 years, flagged 300 of them in Canada, and in particular, 3 Canadian universities were in the global top 10 of these problematic collaborations.
Thank you. If we can get the rest in writing would be terrific. Thank you.